My name is Rennie Bishop. A pleasant good morning to you. Welcome into what we call Brunch at 107.7. My co-host is here, so let me have her say good morning. Good morning to you, Sharmain.
Good morning, Mr. Bishop. We started with a song that was banned from the airwaves in Jamaica several years ago, about 3 decades ago, and now we are discussing decriminalization in Trinidad.
At the end of the day, you've got millions of people all over the world who understand that the system of criminalizing marijuana, a plant in small quantities, is costing the society more than the society is benefiting. We've got a gentleman who is in here. He came in very early. He seems very excited and enthusiastic. I guess that enthusiasm is what we would expect, because he gets into court with the same enthusiasm and he works for his clients. He's got an impeccable record. So before we lay the foundation, Sharmain, let's introduce our guest and bring him into our listeners.
Attorney Wayne Sturge has been practicing for 17 years in Trinidad and Tobago as a criminal attorney. Most all high-profile murder cases that we know of, he's worked on. And in this context, I suppose it would be hundreds of marijuana cases. Hundreds of marijuana cases. Welcome to the Brunch.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It is good to have you here to start what we do. The largest marijuana exporter in the Caribbean, so says the U.S. State Department, has decriminalized marijuana. And to be very clear, they're doing this for medical purposes, even though it's kind of strange to hear them talk about now embarking on medical purposes when they already have a company that is set up to look at using it in a commercial context. But that is not dissimilar to the Colorado consideration and many others, because it is a money decision at the end of the day. They see, in fact, that you can bring a lot more money to the coffers of the state if you, in fact, get it legal and you charge your taxes. They're making a lot of money on it. And there are folks who argue from a medical standpoint there's a lot to be gained. But I want to let Sharmain lay the foundation of marijuana in Trinidad and Tobago, because there was a time it was not criminal. Yes. It was not a problem. Please go ahead and let us hemp the story.
Okay, the time that it was not illegal, it was before 1961, and that's when East Indian indentured laborers brought it to Trinidad and used it freely. The first reported crackdown was under the Narcotics Control Ordinance in 1961. Commissioner of Police at the time, G.T.W. Carr, he ordered a party of police officers and they raided a backyard in El Dorado, Tunapuna, and took away several plants. Subsequently, in 1963, the Narcotics Squad, as we know it today, was formed. Police arrests began at that time, and the first arrest on record was with the Mahabe family in Diego Martin. All right. The Narcotics Ordinance was called the Ganja Law, and there was immediate objection to it. I don't know if in your research, Wayne, there was Couva MP Simbunath Kapildev at the time. He argued for it to be abolished. The law, that is. For years, he said marijuana was commonly used among East Indian indentured laborers. Also in context, it has always been coming from Jamaica, because the federal shipping line between TNT and Jamaica that ran, between TNT and Jamaica, the maple and the palm, hemp seeds were smuggled into Trinidad by then. And by the 70s, it was clear that the new Narcotics Ordinance of 1961 did not have an impact, because there was a mushrooming of plantations in Beach, Mayaro, Rio Claro. And then by 1976, we found that marijuana convictions far outstrip cocaine convictions in Trinidad and Tobago, which I would assume you would tell us if that's the case today still.
It is.
Right. The legislation was reviewed in 1976 and then again in 1991, where we are now operating under the Dangerous Drugs Control Act.
Which was amended in the year 2000.
To include?
To increase fines and so on, and make provisions for new offences, and to make certain offences much more clear.
There are a lot of issues that come out of this, including the possibility of sanctions coming out of Washington, D.C., because most all countries are signatories to the UN war on drugs, as it were. And that's a wonderful contradiction. I saw you open your eyes in a slight amazement, so did I, because when the discussion is raised that Washington will retaliate against folks who make it easier for the trading and their fear that, in fact, you will increase the availability and the export, I say, well, look at your own country country, you've got 20 states where you have decriminalized this situation. So why are you opening your eyes? So let me started with a question for you. How does decriminalization endanger non-users, and in what way will it compromise the government's anti-war campaign?
I don't believe there's an aggressive anti-war a campaign anymore. You have to understand, and let me clear this up. The United States, it may appear Janus-faced, the comments coming from the United States, from Washington in particular, that is coming from the federal government. Each state has the right to pass its own laws, but increasingly you are seeing more and more the states, one by one, they are moving in the direction of decriminalizing. This situation is not new. If you throw your mind back to the 1920s, prohibition and so on, when alcohol was illegal, and they had so much material and so much discussions about the ill effects of alcohol and the campaign they waged against it, and in the end, it was legalized, and it's now a legitimate industry, employing millions perhaps, and providing perhaps billions in revenue for the U.S. government and many governments the world over. And I surmise that the very same thing is going to happen with marijuana. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it seems that way when you look at these statements coming from Washington, the conflicting statements coming out of this great nation. And it seems as though, and before I go down that road, it's unfortunate though that we are waiting until the first world countries proceed down that line before we decide to decriminalize. That's really unfortunate. And
there's a desire to deal with your local constituency, and that should be your first consideration. There is, however, a very serious problem because sanctions can be very biting and can be very destabilizing.
Yes, it can be. And I understand that might be a consideration. But if in your own country you have states increasingly abolishing laws that criminalizes marijuana, how could you, when you go on the international stage, when perhaps half of your federation has moved towards decriminalizing, how could you put on an entirely different face? Of course, there may be sanctions, but I don't believe, having regard to the economics at stake and the type of investment they have in Trinidad and Tobago, that they would simply impose sanctions on us for an infraction like that. That's not even a consideration.
The voice that you're hearing is that I've learned attorney, criminal attorney for 17 years, Wayne Sturge, who's chairman of the Criminal Justice Criminal Injuries Compensation Board. And it's good to have you here this morning. We're talking about the decriminalization of marijuana. Before I get to Sharmain, who I know is biting at the bit with her question, a lot of folks say that marijuana is a gateway drug. And if you decriminalize it, then folks will use it, and you're introducing new problems to society, because if in fact it is a gateway drug, you're looking at additional problems coming at the expense of the Ministry of Finance and so on, and the taxpayers in general.
That's a very bogus and stupid argument. I think cigarette is the gateway. That's the gateway. Most people don't pick up a spliff, if I can call it that on radio. Most people don't start by going down the road and say, let me buy a spliff and light up. It starts off with cigarette. If you want to talk about the ill effects of any sort of substance, I think you should start with alcohol. And alcohol is a processed thing. It's not marijuana, which is a plant. But there are. I'm not going to go one way. I'll be as balanced as I could. There are concerns with marijuana. I agree, but I think it is unfairly blown out of proportion, in the sense that the main concern, if you have schizophrenics and persons with mental illness using marijuana, then marijuana would be a trigger. But so many other things are triggers. That would be the main consideration. But I don't think it's the type of gateway drug they make it out to be. in fact, it might be second or third in the line. So then, why are you, if cigarette is the main gateway drug, and you legitimize that, and you legitimize alcohol consumption, and the effects on the economy of using tobacco, cigarette, using alcohol, would be much worse. In fact, there's a saying that if the whole world smoked marijuana at the same time, there'll be world peace for 2 hours, followed by a global food shortage. That's not the.
There would definitely be a shortage of cricks.
But that's not the same with alcohol. Alcohol wrecks families. It takes away income. It leads to domestic violence. It causes car accidents and so on. Serious health considerations, liver disease. You can go on, and it's the same with tobacco. So marijuana consumption is not any more dangerous. And if you have a concern, my belief is, just like you can educate on the ill effects of alcohol consumption and the ill effects of cigarette consumption, you can do the same with marijuana consumption and leave it up to the person to make his or her choice.
You were in good company, because the Chief Justice Ivor Archie agrees with you, saying that alcohol is something that the society, and I paraphrase, something the society provide assistance for as far as dealing with those who are hooked on it. But the different standard is used for marijuana, which is we jail them.
Yes.
And I understand his point. In fact, when you spoke about the U.S. in the 20s, at the same time that alcohol was legalized to that level and became big business, marijuana was made illegal, and stringent.
Yes.
Stringent rules were set into place. Yeah.
Yes.
But I want to bring it back home to the Trinidad and Tobago context. How are we going to do this? Because we're looking just at our society. Jamaica, we can understand, because Jamaica is, the ganja representative of the Caribbean and stuff. But how are we going to do this? Our jails are filled, as we know, and overflowing with people convicted for small amounts, possession of small amounts, as well as there's also this whole underground economy based on marijuana and the import of it now more than anything else, because we are importing from Jamaica, which is what's on the ground. So how would decriminalization in Trinidad help us?
Well, there are other issues quite apart from those convicted. I think those remanded. So, if you are caught, so to speak, with a small amount of marijuana, you are brought before the magistrate. The magistrate will give approval bail, they call it, and the justice of the peace. They are doctrinaire to the point of being stupid. They believe that once the magistrate says approval bail, you need a deed. That's not so, but you can't change their mind. I don't know what else we can do to change their minds. But the point is, you require approval bail, which requires a land deed in their opinion, and you end up in the jail. I think either last year or year before, I was asked by the Prime Minister's office with Professor Diosaran and others to visit the prison to see what could be done about overcrowding in the remand and so on. And you would not believe how many persons are there for awaiting bail for possession of marijuana. And the thing is, you are mixing persons who are simply users. They are not affecting anyone. If anyone being affected might be themselves, or you go to the mother fridge and deplete it or whatever. But the short point is, you are mixing these persons with hardened and violent criminals, and you are turning them into criminals. You can't be much better than your environment. And if your environment is a bunch of hardened criminals and you have to survive in whatever way you have to survive on the inside, you'll do it. And when you come out, you'll be a criminal.
The state of New York found out that the knee-jerk reaction with the Rockefeller drug laws, and what you had coming out were in fact graduated criminals.
Yes.
And they went in there as innocent users, and that created a problem. I think for folks who stay with the conversation, we need to make very clear what Jamaica is saying. The new law makes possession of small quantities of weed a non-arrestable offense that can instead result in a fine. They're talking about 57 grams is what you're allowed. It also legalizes the cultivation of up to 5 marijuana plants on any premises and the use of the drug for religious purposes. So it's not that carte blanche, go out and do and smoke and grow as much as you want. There are conditions.
I think it's clever of Jamaica to introduce the religion aspect of it. But that's subjective in any event, and anyone could go to court and say, look, Rasta is not about the ear but the heart.
But it also was the basis. The whole legalizing campaign was based on that. It came from the Rastafari movement.
Yes, but listen, I think we need to take the bull by the horns, and I think you can't let the Americans dictate your pace. In the United Kingdom, if you are caught with small amounts of marijuana, that's not a criminal offense. In most European countries, it's the same. You're caught with small amounts of marijuana. It's not a criminal offense. In fact, up till recently, the Dutch treated possession of marijuana as a medical issue and not a criminal issue. And that's the way we need to move. If you are saying it's a medical issue, then you educate aggressively. The same you do with, you don't want your daughter having promiscuous sex and so on, and you don't want her to get AIDS, you educate aggressively.
It is interesting that you know earlier when you slammed and you opened your eyes in incredulity and disbelief, and I understand that because Alaska became the third U.S. state to legalize the recreational use of marijuana for adults, just period, and it's contradictory for them looking at their more than 20 states that have said you can use this in small quantities and or for medical purposes, and now speak of sanctions. But those here in Trinidad and Tobago will ask the question: all right, forget about the United States. What is it costing me? And I think it is instructive more than for you to delineate for our listeners how much it's costing us to put people and keep them in prison. And you know, when you talk about the amount of money we are spending on this industry and neglecting a lot of things in the nation.
National Security, the Ministry of National Security, their budget would be most times would be the largest chunk of the national budget. That's the first thing. And you are dealing with crime detection, crime prevention, and rehabilitation of offenders. So when you have persons holed up in the remand yard, you have to feed them, you have to pay so many prison officers to keep them, you have to pay for the facilities and so on, you have to pay judges, magistrates, and everyone. I'll be the first to say that if they legalize marijuana or decriminalize it, if it's no longer an offense, the lawyers would object, because every Monday there would be the regular courtroom lawyers who they are looking for an income. And the last time I was in Sipario, which was probably not last Monday, the Monday before, 30 persons brought in, charged over the weekend, 23 of them for possession of marijuana, 23 of them charged by one constable.
Because and it's also taking great law enforcement. It's a comfort zone for them, for the police to just arrest a marijuana offender.
They want to say, look, we are doing well, look, we are solving crime, but what are you solving? You're going to hold a bunch of smokers? So but what they do, and it's so stupid, so one police officer, he'll know where the pusher is. He'll stay 100 feet from his home. Someone goes to the house. When he emerges, he knows he's coming back. He only spent 5 minutes there, and they nab him. Oh, well, that's one. And by the end of the weekend, I arrested 23 people with possession of marijuana. You stupid idiot. Why don't you just go arrest the pusher? Yeah. Right? Yeah. But they don't. That's to cover up what is happening in terms of violent crime and murder. The detection rate is abysmal. It is so low. It's obscene to that point. But you are wasting resources, and those resources could be diverted towards dealing with serious criminality and the investigation and detection and so on of serious criminality. In terms of the prisons and so on, you'll probably spend $150, $200 a day on each prisoner. And that might be feeding, and if you apportion the salary of each prison officer and so on, it's an absolute waste of time.
In addition to the families who now no longer have, in many instances, the breadwinner of the family become a burden on the state.
Yes, he does. And you see, the thing is, you are going to turn someone into a criminal when he's not a danger to anyone, and that's my issue. I don't need to go every Monday morning to wait for 23 persons to plead guilty to possession of marijuana to make some money. But I know there are many lawyers who would object, and I understand why. But the short point is, if the resources are shifted to where it ought to be shifted, there'll be a lot more work. And I think we are simply wasting resources, turning persons into criminals unnecessarily.
Criminal attorney Wayne Sturge is with us this morning, having breakfast at 107.7. For your colleagues who may find that it's difficult to find work if you decriminalize this, I can suggest something: white-collar crime. Just a suggestion.
No. If they legalize it, you should open a business. Don't wait on Sapgut to sell it at Starlight.
I wanted to ask Wayne though, the feel on the ground, we explained what it is about, we put it out there. Do we have the political will in this country to do something like that? To actually decriminalize? Because
I believe we do.
Okay.
I believe we do. There's pressure coming from all around, and you see, once the government realizes that there aren't going to be serious repercussions because of treaty obligations, I think they'll do what is necessary. But I think it would be concomitant with aggressive education on why you ought not to use marijuana.
Because the Ministry of National Security as well has
there's a drug treatment court now,
right.
and that's a step in the right direction. Instead of you give someone a criminal record, he probably can't get a visa, he probably can't get work and so on, and you're destroying someone's life for use of a herb that God sent to the earth. You know.
He's a defense attorney, isn't he?
Isn't it? Now that we have him here.
No. Let me get this straight though. I've said all what I've said, but the truth is I've never smoked marijuana, but I also don't drink and I don't smoke.
Yes.
So it's a choice, really. I wouldn't like to hear that my daughter is smoking marijuana. I have 2 daughters. I wouldn't like to hear them smoking marijuana for various reasons. But at the end of the day, if they make an informed choice and they are not addicted or anything like that, that's on them when they are at the appropriate age.
Attorney, the important area here is going to be folks understanding what is involved. And I think as we go forward, asking the lawmakers to seriously look at this, just as the Chief Justice, just as your good self urging right now, we have to continue giving education so people are not leaving with the impression that God help us if we decriminalize this, or other folks on the other side saying, please let them do it so I can go and do my thing, as it were.
I don't believe we have a problem out there. And I don't believe we have an addiction issue with marijuana in Trinidad and Tobago. But the greatest issue with marijuana in Trinidad and Tobago would be, and most people don't know this, we have a high level of mental illness in this country. We don't seem to take cognizance of that. So there are many people who may seem functional and they'll do what is necessary to be functional in the workplace and so on. But the point is, there are latent mental issues beneath the surface, and marijuana may trigger things, trigger certain types of behavior. Once you identify it, that's fine. Quite outside of that, using marijuana and for recreation, that's a choice. You drink, you can cause the same damage. You use cigarette, and we have the Ministry of Health would have to take care of you after that and so on.
That's right.
Yeah. What's the point?
We are, and sadly, we are out of time. But I am going to invite you back because there are many offshoots from this issue that we have to discuss. Yes. In addition to the entire legal system is something we'll talk about after. But I see Sharmain looking at me. Go ahead, Sharmain.
No, one thing I wanted to find out, if you can give an average because of the number of cases that you deal with, percentage, marijuana convictions as opposed to any other drug convictions, and that'll be cocaine or any other. What's the ratio?
When if you have 100 drug cases come into court, you will have perhaps 85, 90 being marijuana cases. So cocaine is more destructive. And when you look at the persons who come before the court for marijuana, regular folks, when you look at the folks coming with cocaine, they are practically vagrants. So I think that's where the resources should go in terms of preventing cocaine use and so on, interdicting cocaine and so on, not marijuana.
It was a great pleasure to have you here. Nice way to start the discussion. I look forward to having you back, criminal attorney for 17 years.
Anytime.
Attorney Wayne Sturge. Thank you so much.
Thank you.